Apparently there's a signal out there that if you see it, or worse yet, if you hear it, it could cause severe confusion, an identity crisis, or worse yet, ultraviolence. No, I'm actually not talking about this podcast, because if you've been listening to my voice for any amount of time, you've probably encountered each of those symptoms. Howdy. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, Senior Editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, and wow, we have a really big podcast today with 5 guests in our Q&A, which is quite cool. And what's really amazing is that this film has 3 co-writer, co-directors. They each took on an act, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, you know the drill. And they are longtime podcast listeners. So I think they were even listening to this podcast around the time that they were first writing their script, which is crazy to think that we've been on the air that long, but it's true, and it's also probably why each and every one of these 3 guys are so crazy, because they have been listening to this podcast. They've lost it. It's melted their brain. But yeah, we're very pleased to have with us co-writers, co-directors Dan Bruckner, Jacob Gentry, and Dan Bush, and of course the 2 actors that were able to make it for the film, A.J. Bowen and Scott Poythress. Of course, keep an eye out for the new issue of Creative Screenwriting Magazine. It's on newsstands. You could find it at your Barnes & Nobles or Borders in America, Canada, and parts of Western Europe. If you want to find out more about what's in our new issue, check out www.creativescreenwriting.com. We interview more screenwriters than any other magazine that we know of, and if you dig this podcast, you'll definitely dig Creative Screenwriting Magazine. But now, without further ado, let's jump right onto the stage as I introduce our esteemed panel to discuss their new film, The Signal.
We have a lot of guests, so we're going to introduce them in order here. We got co-writer-director David Bruckner. Give it up for David. Co-writer-director Jacob Gentry. Give it up for Jacob. Co-writer-director Dan Bush. And of course, you know him as Lewis, the crazy killer, A.J. Bowen. And of course, good old Clark, Scott Poythress. It's always good to have an insane film in the screening series, and as filmmakers, thank each of you for making sure to show so much of the signal that everyone in the audience is going to fucking go crazy and start killing people any minute. Like, you're not supposed to show that in the movie, because it's going to make our people go crazy and kill people. So, shame on you. Bush. Shame on you. Okay. We're going to start, we always start with breaking in stories. David, I know you work a lot with Pieces of Passion pop film, and of course, the Dailies Project. Talk to us about kind of breaking in and, getting into film by making shorts.
Breaking in. We just, we kind of all met in Atlanta, and there was a big underground movement at the time, and it had a very punk attitude. A lot of filmmakers that had, weren't connected to Hollywood anyway. We had weird aspirations of the idea that we might actually make a movie that people would see one day. And we just started throwing each other prompts. We were working with a theater in Atlanta called Push Push Theater, and their whole mentality was workshop. So they didn't put together plays that people would go and see the presentation. What they would do is workshop an idea, and at a certain point they'd invite an audience in on that idea. And, a bunch of the filmmakers were working at Push Push, and we just kind of picked that up. And this thing called the Dailies Project formed. And it was just an opportunity for us to throw each other weird prompts and say, everybody go make a movie and tell the story of this picture. And then we'd find new and interesting ways to kind of collaborate. And we'd all do every single job on the set that we could possibly do. We'd hold boom, we'd write, we'd edit, we'd do everything. And it was kind of our film school. That was my film school, essentially. And one of the projects that we did was this... was an exquisite corpse project. And I worked with a playwright named Rob Nixon, and we started a feature film, and we did the first 20 minutes. And it was loosely associated, it was very loosely related to the material that's in The Signal. And then we passed it off to Dan Bush, and he just went crazy and made like 40 minutes of the movie and lost his mind. And, we had
He's still crazy if you look at him.
Yeah. Excuse me. So we had no aspirations that we were just making this stuff to kind of make it and kind of look at it. And Jacob wrote the 3rd segment, and then he got busy making his first feature film, Last Goodbye. And it never really got up off the ground at that point, so it kind of died down for a little while. And Jacob and Alex, a couple years later, who were producing for The Signal, came to us and said, let's take this thread and let's see what we can do with it. Let's see if we can do a weird 3-director kind of picture and pick it up from there.
Jacob, tell us about your breaking in story. Obviously, as we just said, your first film is The Last Goodbye, based on the novel by Patrick Kay. What was it like to just get the rights and make your first movie, and also have Faye Dunaway and David Carradine in it, man? That's awesome.
Well, first thing, the coolest thing about you asking that question is that I wanted to, as far as the adapting the novel, is that I set out to sort of adapt this novel, but the novel didn't actually exist, and neither did the writer. And I thought it was as a joke before I was actually going to make the film. I was like, I'm going to create an alternate persona, and I want him to someday end up on IMDb. And sure enough, he did. So I actually created the idea that it was based on a novel. I was inspired by Fargo, how they said that it was based on true events, and I was just sort of like, well, people will sort of investigate that, and maybe they'll see, if they won't feel totally duped by it, they will.
Oh, I've been foiled by IMDb many times.
So one of my greatest victories as a filmmaker is that my pseudonym has a IMDb page
and a fake novel, which is
and a fake
good.
novel. I think fake novels are great because it's like someday I'll write it, hopefully, and maybe
get on Wikipedia with all that, like make it really happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so how did that project come about? How did you end up getting, as Atlanta kid, getting Faye Dunaway and David Carradine involved on this non-existent novel? Because you obviously never sent them the book.
They read the book. A lot of people actually came to me and said, "Oh, the novel was fantastic," and I was like, "Oh, you're not involved in the movie." I'm like, "You obviously don't know what I'm talking about." But actually, what we had this sort of community of underground, filmmakers in Atlanta. And a buddy of ours who inherited some money, and he was going to give us like $20,000 to make it on DV, and we were going to shoot it with our friends in Atlanta. And then a friend of a friend got the script to Faye Dunaway, and next thing you know, I went up to New York to meet with her in this strange place in Little Odessa. It was like this Russian carnival, like. There was these long banquet tables, and there was like the Havra, like the whole like Russian extravaganza going on around us. And Dr. Ruth was at the end of the table, like clapping, and I was just like, "Where am I?" I'm a kid from Atlanta. And Alex Motlog, the producer, was just like, he was handing me like shots of Smirnoff the whole time, or vodka of some kind. And I was slamming it, and they were handing me baklava, and I was like, I don't even know what this is, and passing it down. And I apparently had enough Russian vodka that I looked at Faye Dunaway, and I was like, all right, here's what movies are all about. And I'm a 25-year-old kid, and I'm saying this to Faye Dunaway, right? And there was this long pause, and I started going off on this like totally huge tangent about like Mamet and all these sort of things, and I was like, and Mamet says that it's all about convincing people and not, and I just went on and on and on, and then there was this long pause, and she just stared at me with this blank expression, and I just looked at her, and I was like, oh fuck, I'm the most pompous, pretentious piece of shit. Just gonna walk out, and she just goes. She reached in her purse, pulled out like a little flip pad, and goes, "What was the name of that Mamet book?" And I was like, "Holy shit!" So then I proceeded to go on this tirade and pretend that I knew what I was talking about at 25 years old. And next thing you know, she's in our movie, and then we got David Carradine, and it was.
Just on this Faye Dunaway track for a second, just because I'm obsessed with this, I think it's cool, because I think she's cool. I've seen her at all these different writers' events. We were talking about this a second ago out in the hallway. Is it true that she is going to finally start writing a screenplay? Because I've seen her at Q&As, I've seen her taking notes. It doesn't surprise me that she whipped out a notepad and wanted to know that book.
She's one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life, and she would call me all the time, like when we were making the film, and she would be like, "Oh, you got to have 2 weeks of rehearsal, because when we did Network, Sidney Lumet guaranteed us 2 weeks of rehearsal, and blah blah blah." And she'd always go through this whole thing, and she was just very interested in the process of writing, and really really gathering up films and absorbing them, at her later stage in life. And she just would always ask me about this stuff, and I would just feed her movies. She was like, "What's that one movie you were telling me about?" I talked about the Tom Noonan film, What Happened Was, you know what I mean, and she wrote that down, and then she watched it, and she'd call me, and she'd be like, "Yeah, I thought it was great, but the one thing I didn't like was the third act." So she's just, she's a fiend for cinema.
If she calls you drunk, you got to record it, though, buddy. You got to record it. Dan, you studied anthropology, and filmmaking at UNC, correct?
Yeah.
Talk about just what you learned out of film school, because you're the educated guy out of the three, allegedly, and how it helped you for writing and.
I never graduated.
Really? Good stuff.
No, I had 3 credit hours left to get in Italian, and I got sick of being there, so I left. But I abandoned college. But I did have like over 140 hours, and a lot of it was really good coursework with doing filmmaking. But I left there and went down to Folly Beach in South Carolina to get my head screwed on. And I was painting houses, and I was writing scripts with my friend Brian Ransom. And I think what happened was I was kind of getting sick of painting houses. So I called like the South Carolina Film Commission, and I said, there's got to be a movie playing around down here somewhere. And it was called Caught in the Crossfire, and it was a TV movie with Dennis Franz. And so they hired me in the art department. And I started this career in the art department, like just painting and doing set painting. And I worked my way up. And in 2000, I was the scenic charge on Road Trip, which was a weird career path. And, Ivan Reitman was the executive producer of Road Trip. So after working 30 straight days, like 15-hour days on this set, watching Tom Green go nuts every day, I thought, I should take one of my screenplays and just get up the balls and go up to Ivan Reitman and just give him one of my screenplays. And I'd written this gothic western with my friend Brian that was called Bedlam Hollow, and it was like a vampire cowboy thing. And I thought, who else but Ivan Reitman? So I handed him the script, and he didn't give a shit. And I thought,
wait, are you saying the man who brought us Kindergarten Cop did not want to do a gothic western? Is that
right? I don't know why.
Sure.
So anyway, that was very humbling. I was like, you know what? This is the wrong ladder to be climbing here. And so, and that's about the time I met these guys. I was in a little filmmaking troupe called Dulcinea, and we were showing films locally in Atlanta in this little bar in East Atlanta. And these guys in Pop Films were also making films, and I had given up on $10,000 to make a short film in 16 millimeter Super 16 was just too much. So when the digital revolution started happening, I guess I jumped into that, and I was like, well, I'm going to do the Cassavetes thing and just abandon attention to lighting and stuff like that, and just focus on the acting and the story. Meanwhile, these guys were working their asses off to make digital look like film, and they were starting to make a lot of progress. And then their films were the only ones that were showing in this bar that people would stop drinking and shut up and watch. So I think we all started to talk at that point and discuss it. So
actually, that's a good question. What did you guys shoot this in, if you're able to say?
Yeah, we shot this on a Canon XL-H1 in HDV.
Wow, it looked great. AJ, obviously, don't tell me Atlanta also.
Where I'm from?
Yeah, are you also from Atlanta?
Well,
come on.
I would say that 80% of the people on the stage went to the University of Georgia together. And we started making really pretentious short films, heavily influenced by Bergman, even though we didn't know what that meant at the time. And we all became friends through that, and then we all kind of splintered off doing our own thing. I went and starved in New York for a little while, and
well, actually, talk about that experience, because it's got to be tough for an actor from Atlanta, fresh off the bus, going to New York. Obviously, you ended up in Jacob's movie. You ended up in Creepshow 3, right? That's good, man. Creepshow 3.
That's highly subjective.
Well, but come on, your credits are keeping going. What was it like to go to New York, and then obviously I think you made a great choice to come back with these guys, with this collective back in Atlanta.
Yes, I agree as well. I highly recommend to any young artist that is full of piss and vinegar to go try New York for a little while and starve, and get kicked in the nads a few times. And it was really...
It's great advice, by the way.
It was really informative for me. And that pretty brief, it was a couple of years that I was there. I think I went on like half a dozen auditions. It was the opposite of Los Angeles for me, because in New York there were 2 jobs and there were 600 qualified people, and they all had MFAs. They'd all been to Yale. And by the time I came out to LA, I was fully expecting that, and I was older, and I noticed that there were 600 jobs, and there were 1,200 people that were signed up to audition for it, and if you were lucky, 20 people showed up, and out of that 20, 10 of them had ever acted before, and then out of that 10, 3 were appropriate for the role. And so, it was like you really were auditioning against, 3 people more or less if you showed up to the right audition. And the going up to New York forced a pretty high level of pedagogy. It forces you to be pretty self-reliant. And I spent an awful lot of time reading plays and screenplays because I certainly wasn't acting in anything. So that was highly informative. And I actually moved out to LA and had some good fortune when I got out here, and have been working pretty steadily. And I found it funny that my first real substantial role where I got to play was going back to Atlanta to be in my friend's movie. So I highly recommend mostly having very talented friends that will write roles for you.
You know what? Honestly, I'm really glad that you said that about New York. I have friends in New York that have their MFAs and can't even get agents, and I keep telling them to come out to LA. They could blow most of the people out of the room in LA, and they're so convinced that they've got to stay in New York, and it's just driving me nuts. But I mean, you're right, because that's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, I heard.
And there's just no freaking jobs either.
No.
Go where the jobs are, man. Like you made the right choice. Scott, talk about breaking in and your path as an actor.
Wow. Well, I've known these guys for years. Dan, Dave, Jacob, and AJ. AJ and I actually went to high school together, but AJ is, I think, 2 years younger than me, so we didn't speak in high school. I'm kidding. I sort of. Jacob, I've known for going on 20 years, and we've done theater, all 3 of us, of the directors, we've done theater and film together for years and years and years. So going into this was really kind of old hat, and it was really exciting to go to work on a horror movie with your best friends every day and just spray yourselves with blood and just have fun. And we had a fantastic time doing this. Yeah.
Good stuff. All right.
Yeah.
Getting further along in the project, David, so obviously we're starting with you. Talk now as we go down the line about how you guys decided, because, I mean, you gave us a taste of it before, but when you decided to kind of revise it into what we now know as The Signal, in which you were going to split it up into exactly these 3 projects, and they were going to be differing in tone, etc.
Well, I think, we kind of found our way to that. At first, we didn't really know what exactly we wanted to do with it. We didn't know if it was going to be 3 completely separate stories happening in that world, or if they were going to intertwine, or to what degree. And then the more we started connecting the dots on them, the more it got really, really interesting. And so we all kind of separated and brought some basics to the table, some things that we wanted to do. Like, I wanted to do this, tale about infidelity and a woman who, wanted to leave her husband but didn't have the strength to, because I thought, something I always wanted to do in the apocalypse was just become whoever you wanted to be, that it would kind of set you free in a way. And they came with their own things. Jacob had written this kind of situational comedy and wanted to work that in, and Dan had this story of a guy who was fighting against the signal and kind of, gaining a way to defeat it. And we brought it together and just started kind of tossing around ideas about how this could work as one story. So I think in a sense we kind of considered it that we had come together and wrote one story together, but that we each kind of designed the screenplays as it was tailored for each individual piece.
But Jacob and Dan, sound off as you guys want. Like, what was your process like? Were you guys sharing pages? Did you share with what the plot points were going to be in each of your stories so that they would lock up?
Yeah, we got to a point where we came. I think it was right before Halloween, and we brought all our stuff to the table, and they were really defined stories. And I think we kind of figured out. I think we naturally aggregated towards Dave doing the opening Act 1, and Jacob doing the middle part, and me finishing it up. And I don't know why. I think we realized we were dealing with like an absurdist a really absurd set of circumstances. So somehow that gave us license to explore these different perspectives with an absurdist take, and let them go, let them breathe, and shut off the editor for as long as we could. And then we got to a point where there was continuity nightmare. I mean, it was like,
right, because if you don't know what, we're
sharing these characters, and there's and one guy's dead over here, but he's alive again over here, and how do we figure that out? And so I think we finally just huddled up at the Pop Films office, which was really just their house down the street. And we went into the basement with a bottle of Jameson's, and we had an index card wall that we kept taking scenes and we would move them around and shift them around until we finally found something that locked in and worked. And then once we had that, we went off, and we each went in our different directions and helmed our own screenplay for each segment.
So how long did that script end up taking you guys to write before you went into production, and how long was it page-wise?
It was real quick. I mean, it was like 2.5 months, maybe, I think, to completion.
But the time in that 2.5 months was like the amount of time you'd probably spend in 6 months by yourself, right?
Yeah, it was pretty intense. And you had 3 writers, so it was speeding up the process a little bit, but a lot of late nights, a lot of Jamesons.
Talk about your habit for a second when you guys write. How many hours a day are you able to write? What kind of burst do you do it in?
I'm a binge writer. I have to have not anything to do the whole day, and then be like, I'm writing all day, and then of course wait till the end of the day, and it's like I must procrastinate all day long, you know what I mean? I must have nothing to do but write, so that then the id monster finally says, all right, dude, seriously, you've been watching Most Extreme Elimination Challenge for 4 hours. You need to write some pages. So,
David, what's your habit?
I mean, it's changed a lot. I kind of started writing just because I couldn't find any short films that I wanted to do when we were making shorts and stuff. And when we jumped into The Signal, I can't even remember our process on that well, because it happened so quick, and it happened between us a lot. And I think we only did a few. I think I only did a few drafts of Act 1, and was constantly kind of sitting back, seeing where the rest of the story would go, and then going back and kind of trying to make it fit and putting in little tidbits of stuff that would pop up later with, depending on where the story was going. But since then, I've kind of become like a late night writer. Like, since The Signal, I think my active hours are from 2 a.m. till about 6 a.m. for some reason.
Right on, the witching hour.
I get about 4 hours in.
Dan, what about your habit?
It varies per subject matter. I think with The Signal, it was really fun to go, put on some of my favorite scores and soundtrack and music and get a bottle of wine and just, hit it all night long. And the sun's coming up and you're just burnt out because you've been writing for 4 hours or 5 hours. And that was The Signal. And now I'm doing like an astronaut movie. It's a space movie. And so like I get up and go running in the morning. And I actually, by the way, listen to a lot of these podcasts in the morning first thing.
Podcast listener right here. All 3 of you guys there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Big
definitely.
fans, yeah.
Dude, I love having podcast listeners on the stage. That is the best thing ever.
one of the best things about your podcast is that what I've learned is everybody has different sort of dogma as to what their approach is. So, you kind of gather all that up. But most importantly, you sort of these really accomplished people doing the same things you do. Like I was saying about the procrastination thing, and I thought that I was an idiot because for some reason when I was, sort of developing as a screenwriter, I always heard it was like I get up every morning and I write for 4 hours, and then I go do 1,500 push-ups, and then I come back and write for 4 more hours. And I was like, and then to hear all these sort of
The Coen brothers are like,
we take naps,
taking a nap, I don't really.
And that's validating, and that gives you confidence. You know what I mean? It's not just it's not just technique or sort of emulating something that they do specifically, but just that you are not that far removed, and that gives you confidence to sort of create and tell your stories and open up your imagination and go, all right, don't worry about all that other stuff. You know what I mean? You're okay.
Every writer has the same problems. I mean, like that was one of the points of why I wanted to get the podcast out there, is because you look at these movies as like, infallible, etched in stone, and they're not. I mean, even good or bad, whether the movie is, the process to get there has as many speed bumps as you can imagine. And again, it's great to have actual listeners to this podcast on the stage. I think that's totally dope.
Dude, we love it. It's awesome. It's really inspiring.
Now, actors, you guys, your habit, what's your preparation like? I mean, obviously, this was done as an independent film. This premiered at 2007 Sundance. When you guys are on set, are you like off in the corner, kind of getting in the zone, or is there blood on your face and you're just like, kick ass, let's roll a take?
Well, I don't think that Scott and I consider ourselves real actors.
You guys did a great job in this movie.
We just like to pretend, but we're pretty similar in that, right? Basically, for me, it's the same way that I sort of approach my writing, and it's music for me. Like I know it's very Cameron Crowe, but I find a mixtape, I build one, and then that pretty much leads me to what I'm going to do. And in this specific case with Signal, we were really fortunate, because we did what was affectionately called Signal Boot Camp, and we got to spend a good week together all of us and the rest of the actors and Alex, our producer, we got together and hashed out the script and rehearsed it and got to really clearly define. So what we were lacking in terms of, money up front, or we were able to make up for that with our time and our established relationships with each other that made it really possible for us to dig a lot deeper than we already had this established relationships, and I think that really helped in our specific case.
Guys, did the script change a lot when you got it together? And we're going to get back to you in a second, Scott, because I know you didn't answer the question. I'm not going to let you dodge it. But just before I lose my mind here, did you guys do a lot of rewriting when you were doing that Signal boot camp?
Yeah, we had huge plot changes right in the middle. We were throwing things out, and we had some pretty epic sort of nights in trying to figure out where the movie would go. I mean, there were times when we were trying to figure out the rules of the Signal where it was getting really, really wacky.
What are they, actually?
I won't
join in.
I won't get into it too much.
You do not talk about the Signal. Rule 2, you do not talk about the Signal.
At some point, I will say that something about electricity being transferred between people and, resurrecting bodies and all kinds of different things when we were playing around with it in the early stages. And then we just kind of got our shit together and kind of beat our heads against the wall and tried to simplify the story and whittle it down to what essentially we thought was interesting, which was, the story of how people rationalize their way to violence and trying to get ourselves in the shoes of the characters and figure out how that would happen. And it was in that process of finding cool ideas that I think we were able to sort of find the singular note that the film would exist on that would kind of connect all the dots. But we were rewriting on the set constantly and trying to figure out our way.
Having multiple people also cancels out all the bad ideas. If you really trust people and you're willing to listen to their ideas and willing to listen to them telling you that your ideas are terrible, then you can kind of whittle it down to just the best stuff.
Yeah, like was Dan swinging a baseball bat at you, Jacob and David, and you guys were trying to wrestle him to the ground? Was that
in the writing process? Not too far away from that. I mean, not just Dan, but me at Dan, and that's a really important thing. Is just going, oh man, I've learned so much about not being lazy and upping your game and really, really like letting the other people like raise you up to the level that you go, okay, they're not letting me get away with any of my usual tricks, So I'm kind of having to find new things and mine, in your creativity for something really kind of exciting.
It takes a lot of trust. I mean, I think we had to get out of our own way a lot of times. I mean, the arguments would flare up either when, usually in life, it's because, one, I think the person I'm dealing with is an idiot, or two, I'm afraid that I'm an idiot. And those are the two ego roots, that I can think of. And so if you can get out of your own way and serve the story and things like that, I think is that the William Golden thing of spitballing? Like, don't say no to an idea.
Right.
And have that.
And I agree. I mean, when you're brainstorming, you should get it all out on paper and look back at it again, and you can mix and match. I do agree with that.
And really killing your darlings too. I mean, that whole sort of thing of going, I'm not going to be precious about this, because you try to be precious, and to them, like I'm sitting there writing, and I have these two other guys going, yeah. I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever written. And they're like, no, it's not. That's not even that good. That's not going to fit in our movie. And it teaches you to not be precious about things. And I think that's really important.
Or to get better friends.
Or to get better. Yeah, exactly. Which I'm working on.
Also, just the fact that, literally the idea is worthless if you can't make an argument for it. Yeah. There was absolutely no room with these guys to throw something out there and have it untouched. You absolutely had to validate everything, and you had to, kind of scream and shout and squeeze as hard as you could at the idea and find a way to sell it to them, essentially.
Yeah, detach and go, hey, how is this an opportunity to make the movie better?
Why is this cool?
Scott, you didn't dodge it. What's your preparation like, if any?
I honestly, there's not a whole lot of preparation for me involved other than, on this particular project, being really good friends with everybody, showing up on set, knowing the story, knowing the arcs of different characters, the people I'll be on screen with, like Sir Alfred Charles here. Honestly, I'm not really into the method. I'm not into, Meisner, Stanislavski, any of that stuff. There's an energy when you show up on set. And what that energy is going to directly translate what I translate to the screen on any given day. That's just how it goes. And what I do is not going to directly affect that energy. So I kind of have to go with it. I tried to do the best I can with that energy during the day. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but that's just how it is for me on any given day on the set. So I just try to have a good time, try to make the shots roll along, try to stay within our time frame, try to stay within our 22-hour day. And,
is that why when I do the Meisner stuff with you, you give me that blank stare?
Yes.
I just give you the blank stare?
Well, we're big fans of Scott, so it's really just putting him in a place where he can go, and I think not being too self-conscious about what he's doing allows him to kind of go places that, other actors maybe wouldn't go.
Gonna cry.
There's a story like this has a lot of roots. The horror genre kind of eats itself sometimes. Obviously, as we know, there's an X-Files episode where people see stuff on their TV and they go and they kill. I think it was called Blood or it was called Red. I can't remember. I didn't look it up because I'm lazy. How about that? There's obviously Stephen King's book Cellular, which they're trying to make into a movie where people get it on cell phone signals.
No, Cellular was a fantastic Chris Evans and Kim Basinger picture directed by the man who gave us Final Destination 2 and Snakes on a Plane, just so you know.
Snakes on a Plane? But no, because Cellular, I got the title right. Stephen King wrote a book called Cell.
Yeah.
Did I say so? Oh, I said Cellular. There you go. I should not drink
the bane of our creative existence.
We've heard the word cell come up more than once.
Yes. But okay, here's my point though. Is that in the horror genre, a lot of these things are very derivative. Here's what I think is absolute genius about what you guys did, is most of these stories is a small group of people that are unaffected by said virus, said zombieism, whatever the hell it is, and you're rooting for them because they're like you, they're the heroes. You guys flipped it, and the heroes are all kind of crazy because no one really got away from the signal. And I think it's brilliant that you guys had very tainted, crazed heroes. Where did you get the idea to finally flip it and add something new to a genre that is otherwise tired?
Well, we just kind of got to a point where, despite the fact that our tagline was "Do you have the crazy?" that we couldn't call any of our characters crazy because it was dismissive, and it just wasn't interesting to us. And there's very few times in the movie where someone looks into the signal and turns around and kills somebody. It just doesn't happen that way. And so we kind of made a point of trying to get inside the shoes of all the characters, and we just thought it'd be more interesting and actually more scary to us personally if we could essentially follow their rational thinking to the point of violence, get inside their shoes. Rod, for instance, he's running around the hall doing what he thinks is necessary, and it's all about the moment where he starts to wonder, am I part of the problem or am I the guy fixing the problem? And that ambiguity just got really, really interesting to us. Sometimes you really can't tell in the movie if the signal is affecting somebody or if it's just affecting society and it's creating a domino effect that's then affecting everybody else. Am I killing you because I looked at the signal and now I've got violence in my blood, I've got rage in my head? Or am I killing you because you looked at the signal and I'm afraid you might do that instead? And that ambiguity got really interesting, and kind of just the more we talked about it, the more we stumbled down that path, we just got really, really fascinated with the idea of running in that direction and not allowing ourselves too many cheats, hopefully, and having to explain where they're all coming from.
The paranoia overdrive is much more effective when everybody's the hero of their own story. And we get that perspective of everybody's character, and you go, okay, this is something that's happening to everybody. Or maybe it isn't. Maybe it's happening to him. Maybe it's happening to me. And I think that the difference is having that monster over there coming at you, and you can team up with your friends and run away or fight it or jump through the window or shoot it with a sawed-off shotgun. You're simultaneously you're like, wait a minute, am I the monster? Or maybe my friend is the monster. And dealing with your own sanity and whether or not your perspective on the situation is valid or justified or rational and makes any sense at all is horrifying, because you're going, oh my God, wait, I'm crazy. No, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy because what I'm doing makes sense. And if we as filmmakers get inside that view of all these characters and give them all a fair shake and make them all the hero of their own story, then you can kind of go, that's a fun game to play with the audience, and it's a fun game to play with the characters, and it's a fun game to play overall, because you go, I don't even know who to trust. I don't even know if I can trust the filmmakers on this one,
Yeah, we had in the device of perspective, right? So you got three different perspectives, and if you're, I think about A Cask of Amontillado, Edgar Allan Poe, and how you're identifying with, or Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle, you're identifying with this this guy, and you're kind of going down the road, and you're listening to his voice, and you're thinking, oh yeah, the world's kind of fucked up, and I get where he's coming from. And then all of a sudden you cut to the objective perspective, the omniscient, or maybe the Sybil Shepherd's in that case, perspective, and you're going, that guy's crazy, he's insane, and I was just right there with him. And so in that device of using the POV and getting in the character's head, I think gave us an allowance with that more so than anything else.
I always thought it was normal to bring a girl to a porn theater on the first date until I saw that movie, actually.
I just stopped pouring rum on my white bread in a bowl like 2 weeks ago, so I don't know.
It's terrible. I want to talk for a second, because I really do think that genre fans are going to react really well to what you guys did, because the boring version of The Signal would have been if, some nice people were running away from all the bad people, and that was it. There was no other level. As you guys know, as podcast listeners, we get a little intricate sometimes in the story. I'm going to do that right now because I want to go through each of your 3 segments really quick. Transmission 1, Crazy in Love. Obviously, it convinced me to never live in an apartment building again, and I won't because that was terrifying.
That's actually my apartment building. That's where I lived at the time.
I would move.
And, the landlord was actually showing apartments the day that we filled the hallway with bodies. And that's probably the singular best walk of shame I've ever seen. It's like everyone on the crew is just staring at their feet, kind of kicking at the floor as she marches people over pools of blood and weird head wounds. So.
It also taught me that everyone in Atlanta has a better television than I do.
It's the same television.
Terminus. It's Terminus.
Terminus.
It's a low-budget film. We moved the same TV around. It's the same
dude,
one.
Janice has a better TV than I do, and that's upsetting. All right. No, but seriously, talk about the opening shot, because you almost do like a punk swipe at the torture type of movie where the opening is this weird torture movie, and then you realize it was, I'm guessing, just playing on their TV before the signal comes on.
Punk swipe, that's nice. That was actually kind of a collective decision. That was a really late decision in the process that we came to. We always thought that the blue scene, as we called it, the kind of the opening between Maya and Ben that would set the tone for their relationship was a landing point, and that we needed to do something more in the vein of what people's expectations might be.
Compensate for the moonlit male ass.
Yeah, well, and
sooner or later,
it was just so beautiful. We had to shoot it.
Just want to bite it.
It all started. Justin kind of he wanted to do the scene in the buff because he thought it would put him in the character more, and they had an airbrush on set, and once they brushed his glistening buttocks, we were like, my God, you've got to walk naked towards that.
The movie made itself at that point.
That's just gorgeous.
Who needs writing?
But the opening was we knew we wanted to do something, and we actually had a cut of the film, and we're going, what are we going to do? We had ideas about Clark, trying to hook up the cable and bad things happening and kind of connecting the dots there. And then Jacob actually had made this 48-hour film that was this weird, kind of homage to Last House on the Left and these 70s era grindhouse sort of violence films, and it was just kind of sitting there. And Dan suggested, well, what would happen if we threw a little bit of the Hap Hapgood on there, which was the title of the film. And we threw it on there, and it was really interesting. And the idea that you would see this and go, everybody in the audience is going, shit, is this the kind of movie I'm about to get into? And then that film gets interrupted, and you get glistening buttocks. And that was just going to, throw your expectations completely off. And that, on some level, intuitively, you'd be going, what the hell is this movie that I'm about to watch? I can't trust it at all.
Well, so wait, Jacob, that was out of a movie that you made?
Yeah, it was a short film. There was this international film festival called the 48-Hour Film Festival, where you have 48 hours to create a movie. But I mean,
I just thought, because there have been so many torture movies. Horror fans are kind of split as to whether they like them or they don't. Your movie is very dialogue heavy. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think that, if you look at what he was, what was important was that these two people in this bed together is really what is the driving force of the entire empathy of the film, right? It's like whether or not you want them to get together or not get together by the end of the movie is paramount to everything else. And so it's like, what are we going to do? Do you start a horror film out with just these two people in the bed talking? Do we have the confidence enough to do that, or do we want to set the tone for that? And I think that to really, really just give a little juice, and then let's just let that scene be and it helped Dave to be able to make that scene as sort of breathe as much as possible, because I think we all really believed in what he was trying to do with that scene. So
It almost seems like an homage to De Palma's Blowout too.
I wish that it was. I wish that any.
Well, because that starts with like the fake movie.
Yeah,
the fake horror movie.
The fake.
But David, there's a very serious tone to it, and it starts as what people would expect as an opening act of a traditional horror film, and obviously we're going to get to Jacob in a second, where the tone changes. Did you ever want to get more comedy in there? Was your goal to really just set up the world and the problem so that the film could go off from there?
I think the idea was just that we were introducing a new conceit, that it was something that audiences hadn't seen, and that every time something in the horror genre comes back, like when zombies came back and you saw something like 28 Days Later, it seems like every time a subgenre is reinvented, somebody makes it real to us. They make a film that really helps us suspend our disbelief. It's not necessarily ironic. It's not existential. It's not a weird art film. It's just something that sort of gets back at the visceral roots of where the genre exists, and we get to kind of play along with it and play that game of going, okay, what would I actually do? What is actually happening here? And we kind of wanted to, as we were developing it, we realized that the whole film was going to do kind of all three of those things, and that I kind of felt like the goal of the first chapter was to root it in the real as much as possible, so that you invested it in that way, so that you lived in it in a sense of going, okay, this is something that's happening, this is the game that I'm playing, I'm thinking about the logistics of how to escape, I'm thinking about who's crazy and who's not, how do I survive. And there's a little satire. I like, a really subtle satire, with like Rod and the Mace and his entire journey, but I didn't want any of that to pop up until the signal happened, and just kind of hint at the idea that this was going to get a little bit weird and a little bit funny. And then by the time we get to the second chapter, it completely turns on its head, and the channel flips in the movie, and we're watching something completely different.
But you do have a great comedic moment that's really spooky, too. It's the guy's ready to kill her, and he just kind of waves his finger at her. Was that something that was in the script? Because, it was really a great moment, and it's like the crazy guy is distracted, he looks down the hallway, and he's kind of like telling her, just wait here a second, because I'm going to come back and kill you after I kill somebody else.
My favorite thing, if I could figure it out in future movies, is that thin line of, I don't know if I'm supposed to laugh at this or not. Like, that's just kind of a magical place for me.
Was that on the page, or was that moment found on set?
Yeah, that was on the page. That was something that we always wanted to do, and it was the kind of thing that, you can show it to some people, and they'll look at it, and they won't even, they won't flinch at all. And then certain audiences will erupt into laughter at that moment. So it's such a strange, flirtatious little idea.
Last question before we move on to Jacob. You were the first act guy. Do you like writing first acts in your own work? Because some writers, they hate it. Some writers hate one part of the process, but they're happy with the rest. Is that why you were the opening?
I think in the stuff I'm working on now, that seems to be the hardest part for me. But for this, it seemed like it was something I really wanted to do. I really wanted to focus on turning the world over. And I had a lot of responsibilities to kind of describe to the audience on our limited budget that this was actually happening. Following Maya's perspective, to the degree that you see just enough to believe, there's a million maniacs running around this city. This is a very, very dark time. And I got really excited about the tricks of doing that kind of thing and finding a way to sort of describe to the audience a sense of chaos, a sense of really intense, visceral fear.
Jacob, second act guy. Talk about, obviously the jealousy monster, Transmission 2. What gave you the idea to go so comedic? It's slowly been coming back. Obviously, Shaun of the Dead was a landmark to bring comedy into the horror genre in a way that really reinvented it as the Scream movies were getting a bit tiresome. Talk about your decision to do that.
I don't necessarily know if it was a conscious decision. I'm really glad that Dave decided to do what he did so that it would make it possible, because I do agree with him 100%. I don't think you can be sort of satiric or, as farcical as the second act was right off the bat. I think you need to earn that, and I think that that was one of the great things about writing with these other guys was and directing with these other guys was that I kind of had this alley-oop of going, all right, now you can kind of have fun. And I was just on to some Blake Edwards, I was just on to some,
It becomes a complete farce in places. You got the audience. Tonight we had a great crowd. They were laughing at all the right places. When the doorbell would ring, they were laughing. You're using traditional things, but
I don't think enough credit is given to what he was doing in the first act, making that funny, which is, it's setup and payoff, right?
Well, right. And the setup is a serious horror movie.
Yeah, I try to, obviously there's some jokes that end up just being jokes in and of themselves, but you want as much as possible for your comedy to be rooted in the overarching like stakes of the whole thing. I mean, you want it to be as high stakes as possible, so that if you decide to go down the road of comedy, that it comes from the situation and the struggle of the characters as opposed to some just funny way that somebody says a line, And ultimately, what was cool was just sort of the signal preys on your fears and desires and causes you to sort of second guess everything that's going on around you, and your perspective is skewed, and you begin to rationalize, this violence and everything. And I sort of just saw it as like, at the company Christmas party when everybody is drunk, but they're around people that they're never drunk around, and they're like basically trying to act like they're not drunk. And no one is funnier than a drunk person trying to act like they're not drunk, because they're doing the whole I'm fine, but we're going. It's cool. No, how's Monday? See you Monday. And I think that just ended up sort of where, and I was like, and at the same time, the apocalypse is going on.
By the way, the actors are kind of critiquing your performance at the end of the row.
That's why we work with them, and that's why I'm not in the movie. But then you add the apocalypse onto that, and you go, all right, everyone. When the apocalypse happens in most movies, it's like immediately everyone gets a chainsaw and they're all of a sudden Rambo, and it's just like, they're all of a sudden Mad Max, and everyone's, driving, cars. And driving cars, what?
Sounds like the apocalypse of
Dude, the
cars.
apocalypse, dude, seriously, when the shit goes down, everyone's going to be driving. It's going to be insane. No, but that etiquette, that just simple little social etiquette thing that everyone has, that we all do, I think that we would hold on to it a little longer than we think we would, especially if the reason for the apocalypse is something that messes with your perspective. So therefore, everyone is still trying to maintain that, and there's nothing funnier than a room full of people on LSD trying to act like they're not on LSD, you know what I mean? And so, not that I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, you're talking about the writing process, of course.
Yeah. That was actually it. So, I mean, that was just it. It was Noel Coward. It was a Noel Coward play transposed onto The Shining.
With blood, yeah. But I mean, it was great that it was also completely absurdist because, I mean, they're forgetting who's who and what's what. I like the way that you were using one shot, or it looks like one shot, to have the actors switched in and out. That was great. And tonally, was it difficult to balance on the page because you are still having AJ being really menacing in different places right after a great joke. So
I mean, the jokes were, like I said, the jokes were meant to be plot relating and that kind of thing, and stakes oriented. So whenever it happened, and then that was the thing, was that we did take this sort of comedy thing and then jerk the rug out from under you and have this horrifically
ending,
raw, sort of just the most not funny thing ever,
But I mean, I really like the blending because I mean, AJ, when you're killing the Jim character, he's like, "Hey, why'd you do that?" As you're in the act of killing him, and then the decapitated head was another great touch. Dialogue for a second. When Jim says, "When that ball drops, I'm going to grab a slut and I'm just going to pee in her butt." When one crafts dialogue like that, but seriously, was that on the page? Was that an improv? It cracked me.
We were really worried that, I'm glad the strike happened. No, I'm not glad the strike happened in general, but I'm glad the strike happened because I was afraid that was going to end up on Entourage and then they were going to get credit for it. But actually, Chad came up with that. And I basically he was the only sort of actor in the movie I was just like, here's this thing. I underwrote it. It's not fully developed. Do whatever you want. And I knew that he was going to do his homework. I knew he was going to come back with some stuff. And he sort of had all these notes and all this sort of thing. And he would talk to me, and we worked on the mustache and the leather jacket and all that stuff. But I was just like, all right, if I get the mustache and leather jacket, the rest will do the work for it. So he had all these sort of things that he was going to do, and that literally was the first take. And it cuts right when we blow the take, because I think that
yes,
Dave was.
We did.
They had their backs, and you could see them sort of like. And I was laughing my ass off because I had never heard any such horrible thing to objectify a woman in such a way. It's awful. And Dave was actually shooting that part, and I was directing, and the camera fell on the ground closely thereafter, and Basically, he has a friend from Alabama, and apparently that's what they say to each other. I don't know. I don't know what that says about Alabama, but...
Nice. I also like, I mean, when Scott says without a doubt this is the worst fucking day in mankind's history, that was pretty good too. Transitionally, did you guys work together? Because I'm getting to you in a second, Dan, as to where you're leaving off and where the next guy's picking up. Was there a lot of intermingling on that? Any of you jump in? Dan?
I think we when I know that the point at the end of Transmission 2 and the beginning of Transmission 3, you know, with Ben kind of coming in and you didn't know where this character had been. I think when we kind of found that early on, that was a pretty early thing that we found. And it
that
was fun. That was like, yeah, you know, and
it's one of those scenes where you're literally directing the same shot from two different directors. So it's like, you know, there's a different direction to the actor, but the setup of the shot is actually the same.
That got a standing ovation at the Sundance premiere. Not standing, but everybody was like, yeah, everybody was cheering.
Right on.
Not since the end of Rocky have people been moved that much by a film.
All right, well, Dan, getting to Transmission 3, Escape from Terminus, third acts are really important. I mean, how you end your work, it's got to amount to something. It's got to have a good ending. I think you did a great job because you do the fake out at first when they're on the train. And you're just kind of like, really? Everybody in society's going crazy and the train's still working okay and they're able to get out of town. And then you flash back to the fact that, no, they're still trapped in the station and they were just imagining a flash forward. How did you first get that idea of that kind of being your ending point?
I don't know. That's a thing that I visit that kind of idea in a lot of my short films that I've done, and I think I really believe, first of all, I believe in tension, like leaving in completely unanswered questions for the viewer, or stuff that's prompted, but leaving them to go, oh, well, what was that? Was that a fantasy, or was that real, or what? You know, was that the future? And then, you know, kind of along the lines of, does it really matter? I mean, what's the emotional thread here? What was at stake, and what was the possibility? You know, and those questions for me are more important than whether or not, you know, they get away together, or whether or not, you know. I just wanted to keep that question open for that specific ending, I guess.
I also really liked the flashback that was done of showing, you know, his handprint on the window. I thought that was because you know, sometimes flashbacks are cliched and cheesy, but again, because you just had two of them in yours, I thought it was really well done. And you know, could you talk about that point? Like when you were writing it, did you see the image of the bloodied handprint on the glass that we start with him looking at, and then we flash back all the way until he gets to the point you learn how he put that fingerprint on the glass?
Can I just interrupt you for a second, Dan, and just say that's the single best storyboard that we had for the entire film. Like, it's exactly the same as the movie.
It's actually it's not actually not a shot from the movie. It's actually the storyboard. It's a plate.
Yeah, Dan had that all planned out.
There was acts. The third part of the movie is Ben Capstone, and I was interested in this guy who, on the most base level, it's a guy who's looking for his girl during the apocalypse. You know, it's the apocalypse happens, the one that you love the most, you can't find her, and it becomes a detective story. And so, but then also part of that detective story is him remembering, you know, he's been hit in the head with a bat, and he lived. And so he's barely starting to realize what's happening. And
Andy's influenced by The Signal, as you show.
Right.
He turned back on the TV and watched it till dawn.
Right, and so that's just the first, he gets out of, when he first becomes conscious again, that's his first plot point, it's his first memory, and it's the visceral memory of, oh, you know, when he sees the blood, that triggers the entire set of events, and he remembers who killed him. And then, which I wanted to go back and watch him get walked down with a bat and get the shit kicked out of him, and then get killed, for all practical purposes, so that when he came in there, and found Lewis, you know, with his torture party going on, it was just total vengeance, because that drives you to the point where if he gives into the signal, then he becomes signalized. He becomes as bad as Lewis. He becomes a monster. But if he doesn't, and he survives that, then he risks everything he's fighting for, and that's the whole point of that thing. And so I guess that's the bloody handprint was the.
I'm a longtime fan of the works of Philip K. Dick, and one of the things that I think that you did so well here was that this movie could have felt like 3 non-indifferent parts, do you know what I mean, that just don't blend together. But you really built on the tone that was set by David at first, some of the comedic elements and craziness that Jacob put in, and you blended it really well for that insane transformation where one guy talks another guy out of his own identity. And what was that like to write? Because I thought it was... You don't see audiences sitting still for stuff like that in movies a lot. That's why most of the works of Philip K. Dick haven't been literally adapted. They take like a couple sentences and they hang a movie around it. But what was it like to put that on the page and come up with it?
Is it you're talking about the last little trick that Ben plays on?
Yeah. The trick where Ben basically says, "No, I'm the husband," and he tries to talk AJ.
That was really dangerous. I was really scared of that, and I was afraid that that's the point when audiences just be like, "Oh, just Fight Club, man, what are you doing?" You know. I think that was inspired by Act 2 primarily. In Act 2, we see these people struggling with identity, struggling with who, Lewis can't tell who Maya is. He can't ever figure it out, and if we take that to the next level of signalization, and we were struggling because there was a huge change at the last minute. We were about a week away from shooting, and or maybe more than that, but there was a huge change in the structure of our movie. We had, for all practical purposes, 2 inciting incidents, and it was...
Define them just for the crowd so everybody's on the same page.
Well, one was the signal, and then we actually at one point had some another thing happen out of that, another miraculous huge event that brought people back to life in an undead kind of way, and it was forever to figure out how to make that work, and it caused severe, once I finally figured out a puzzle of like, oh, I understand what it is. Terminus is, collecting souls. That's what it is, or something, you can't get out of Terminus. And I found all this mythology, but then Dave brilliantly came to Jacob and I and was just like, no, we need to make this fucking simple. We need to stick with the one thing and make it about the people. And he had written a treatment about why, at this late stage in the game, this idea was so important. And I was so attached to my huge puzzle piece that I'd manufactured that I had lost my mind when they called me up and they were like, no, we gotta kill that. So consequently, I'm like, well, I don't know where I'm going with this exactly, except to say that somehow that took me and Jacob to the bar, the Earl in East Atlanta, and we were sitting there with drinks, and we were going, okay, let's put this thing together. Let's figure out how to wrap this up. And if the motif at that point was an identity crisis, if people don't know who they are and who they're relating to, then how do you take it to the ultimate level? And then it occurred to me that he has to become Lewis, because ultimately they are 2 sides of the same coin.
And you've had these such huge, just like crowd roaring kills up until that point. It's like, what are you going to do to kill what is considered the antagonist, of the piece?
And he can't use violence.
Yeah, he can't use violence because he sees through it. So it's like, what better way than to use the signal to win?
Yeah, I thought it was really smart. I think you guys have seen Irreversible a few too many times with all the head banging with the...
Irreversible?
Irreversible.
We have more hits than Irreversible.
We had a lot of arguments about the end there. I mean, it was great because they came in and they were swarming on it and going, yeah, he's going to flip, he's going to convince him of this other thing. And I was just screaming, like, convince me why Ben does not pick up the hammer and hit Lewis in the back of the head. Like, convince me, because I'm just like, I'm ready to kick him in the ass. Like, grab the hammer and hit Lewis in the back of the head, and they did. They fought for it, and it made sense by the end of the day.
It worked, and it was really smart. AJ and Scott, you're here with these 3 co-writer directors. We've just heard about how much these guys are arguing about their scripts, trying to make sure that they get it right. What kind of level of improvisation were you guys allowed in this? Because most writers aren't real excited when the actors go off script, but it's what actors sometimes do best.
I think with all 3 guys, knowing them so well, we would hammer out what was in the script initially. It seems like, if I'm remembering correctly, given the day and given the shooting schedule and what we had to knock out, all 3 of them would say, all right, you guys have some fun. Do this, do what you want in this one. Do it this way, do it that way.
So after you did the take the way they wrote it, they'd give you some leeway.
Yeah, it seems that way, if I'm remembering correctly.
Do we even do that many takes?
1. One. I did one. You did lots. I can't remember. But I'm kidding. Wow. But yeah, I think they were all three guys were very liberal with us. And
were there any great improvs you guys did as Lewis and Clark that you want to tell us about that wound up in the movie, or any great moments that were a bit off script that you're proud of?
There was the pretzel thing that wasn't written, but it was discussed once we found the bowl of pretzels, right?
This is a creative screenwriting, discussion, and the greatest thing ever is to just go, all right, you write in the script, Lewis and Clark are sitting on the couch, they have cocktails in their hands. And that's, one line of a script, and that ends up being 30 seconds of the most joyous, the most satisfying screenwriting I've ever done in my life. Because these guys just sitting there watching them do that, and having built up to that moment, brilliant. When you guys get a chance to see the movie again, there is a timing of crunching that's on like some Peter Sellers level, man. I'm telling you what, man. Some genius shit going on there. It's like, come on, DDL. It's got nothing on the way they eat pretzels. And it was like, and they did the look over, and then they look back, and they look over at each other again. And then she comes over with the drink, and they look up at her. And that was literally like we didn't talk about it. It wasn't one of those things. They just had that one line, and it was just like, let these, really talented people do their magic, No,
and it was a good break, obviously, from all the killing and everything else, like to just kind of see these two guys that don't know each other try and get used to each other, but not exactly. What do you guys do when you battle writer's block, if you get it? Just really quick, and we're going to open it up to the crowd for a second for your questions. What do you do to battle writer's block if you get it? I'm sure in a project like this, there wasn't a lot of time for it. Go down the line.
Really, really, really long walks, honestly. I just wander around forever, and then take left field, take something that's completely out of whack, and just run with it. And for me, and especially since The Signal, I have to convince myself to write disposable scenes. I just have to say, this is not a scene in the movie. This has nothing to do with the movie. It's just a flourish, and I'm just going to kind of play with it. And so I just kind of, go off in another direction and write it, and it usually stirs something else up the next day.
Jacob?
For me, it's absorb myself with things that are like completely so brilliant that I don't even understand how they're brilliant, and break them down and try to somehow just get a inkling of what they're doing with that, and then eventually convince myself that I'm somehow better than that. And then that somehow motivates me to do something, even though,
Dan?
I don't know. I wish I had more time to write. It seems like these days I'm busy. I'm like constantly. I was writing on the plane on the way here. I was like, here's a couple hours to jogging lately. When I get up, when I get writer's block, I'll go run, and I'll just keep running. And there's something that happens in the exercise thing that all these ideas hit me. And I don't know.
So do you have like a notepad with you when you jog?
Yeah. No, I just hang on to them.
All right. Very good.
Get back to the downs.
I'm going to ask the actors two questions that we're going to bring back to you guys, and then we're going to turn it over to the crowd. Toughest scene for each of you, and then for you guys, the toughest scene to write, so you have time to think about it. AJ, starting with you, what was the toughest scene that you shot?
Well, physically speaking, it was very tough to hit Chad with a glass more than one time. We did that 3 times, and right up until then, there was some joy in being able to punish everyone. We could see the humor in it and knew that it was a facade. We were behind the curtain on that, but we had this this sugar glass, and I thought I was going to feel like a pillow when I hit him. And the first time that I hit him, it broke, and a piece of it stuck in the back of his head. And he fell on the ground, like, what do you do that for? And I had to kick the shit out of him, and the whole time I'm seeing his back of his head bleed with this thing in it. And right in that moment, I completely lost the joy for punishment and became a pacifist. And then they said, we didn't get it, we got to do it again. I was oh, shit. And so I was so paranoid by the last take that I was going to look like a total puss when I hit him with it, that I just hauled off, and that's the one that's in the... I drilled the shit out of him on that, and I felt...
You knew we only had 2 glasses, right?
Yeah, so I was like, I got to make this one work. That was tough. But the scene for me that was challenging intellectually would have been the very first one, with Maya coming back home, because
Creepy husband.
yeah, and insofar as the trick, like with what any good script will allow an actor to do is play a multidimensional human being. And so that's a strength to having 3 writers on the film. Like, they each had a tone, and that just lent us the ability to play a multidimensional human being. And so in this first scene, I was trying to figure out, okay, so this guy's pissed, and his wife's home late, and Dave and I had several conversations about, does Lewis know that his wife's having an affair? Does he know who she's having it with? What's more important to him? Her happiness, or, and in that opening scene, it was very difficult because it was very little time to establish in a sane way that this guy cares about his wife. So that was incredibly daunting for me. Everything else was just beating people over the head, and that took care of itself.
You were convincing. I mean, I love clocking things like this, but at this screening, we had 6 people walk out because
Sweet.
I know. I think it's cool. Like, it's your street cred, because anytime as a filmmaker that you could do something on screen that makes people forget that there's lights and a grip and some craft service table down, 10 feet away, that they actually think someone's being killed, special effects aside, you're doing your job right. Yeah, absolutely. Scott,
Where was craft services?
We had craft services.
Scott, what was your toughest scene?
Toughest scene for me probably was my very first day of shooting was a scene where AJ Lewis is chasing me, Clark, and Justin Ben into my apartment after the knives have come out of my arms and we're escaping the apartment scene into Clark's apartment. And he's about to hammer down the door with a sledgehammer, trying to bust in and get to us. I had not established a rhythm with the crew other than these guys. And half the crew I didn't actually know. So that scene the stakes were really high on that very first scene, and that was my first day of shooting. So that was probably my toughest.
David, toughest scene for you to write?
I think it was actually the scene where Maya comes home and first talks to Lewis, building up to Jerry's death. And the reason was that one of the things that we wanted to do with Act 1 was we really wanted to have it from the point of view of a layman. Like, Maya is not affected the same way other people are affected. So it's not getting inside her head. So from her perspective, we really don't understand what's motivating the aggression behind everybody. We get little hints here and there, but essentially we wanted it to kind of be dissonant in a way, kind of weird and foreign. We knew that later in the movie we were going to get inside of it, and we knew even with Rod we were going to get inside of it. We were going to have a guy who gets to make his case and explain from his point of view why he's doing what he's doing. But if you cut in the middle of that movie to Rod and you didn't get him to explain his point of view, and he's running around with a homemade mace made from a candlestick holder and a bunch of kitchen knives, you'd just be like, that guy's fucking crazy. But when he gets
that got laughs tonight, by the way. Yeah. People did laugh at that.
But when he explains his point of view, it makes perfect sense why he's doing what he's doing. And so we don't have that opportunity with Lewis. We don't totally know where he's at. And a lot of that conversation that AJ and I had was trying to leave enough room in there to, motivate from a human perspective what it was that he felt for his wife and where he was willing to go with it, and how he had to kind of tell her in the subtlest sense that, I know that you're cheating on me, but neither one of us has the guts to bring it up here, and how that somehow motivates to a self-defense mechanism that has something to do with Jerry in the room swinging a bat. And that it was just odd, and that oddness felt right. And to find a way to do that logistically in a way that made sense that we could kind of talk about was kind of difficult. That took a bunch of rewrites.
And at the same time, when we first meet Lewis, he has been exposed to the signal. He's trying to fix his TV, so he's slightly off kilter to begin with.
Yeah.
Jacob, what was the toughest scene for you to write?
To write?
Yeah, your toughest scene to write.
I was thinking about it while he was answering, and because I was thinking, I guess for me it was just there was challenges that were just like stuff that I wanted to overcome, you know. But there wasn't anything that was inherent except for the things that were overlapping, and that had to really. I really wanted to make sure that the alley-oop was there, and that the volley was there for them, you know. And I really wanted to make sure that I paid off whatever David set up, and I really wanted to make sure that I gave Dan enough to do. And I think that I don't want to say toughest scene, but I think one of the most exhilarating and challenging moments of just like letting go is when Dan and I have this crossover moment in acts. Well, actually, all 3 acts have it, but 2 and 3, we had sort of designed the scenes to be very similar, and then he was going to I was going to do this piece, and then he was going to do that same piece, and then keep going forward a little bit, and essentially, really just there was like 3 pages of dialogue on that. And you know, just working with AJ and Justin on the piece, and we just finally whittled that like 2 or 3 pages of dialogue down to 1 line, and he just goes, "You're him." And because it was a scene that I wanted to make sure that worked, but also wanted to honor what he was going to do with it, it was just kind of like, all right. And then you let all of that dialogue and all of that sort of explaining how the character's feeling and what's going on between them. And if you've done your job until that point, you shouldn't have to do any of that stuff. So it's just like, it's going, all right, well, I feel like these actors, you know, the actors were sort of just like, yeah, you know, AJ and Ben and Justin were like, that's it. And they did it so convincingly. It was just like, all right, it's very freeing. It's very liberating just to let go and just go, yep.
Chime in very briefly on that. Like, that's a huge compliment to these guys, because all of us I've had conversations with all 3 of these guys about the script, because we did get some time to flesh it out. And they're like what Jacob was talking about earlier. They weren't precious. They weren't beholden to anything. So the idea was, okay, let's figure out what we're saying, and they were totally open to finding that path together and figuring out. And Dan did the same thing, you know, where it's like, okay, what are we saying here? How can we say it? It's very rare when a writer is very willing to say something in as few of words as possible, and that distillation happened several times on it. So
yeah, no, it totally worked. I mean, obviously, second acts for a lot of writers are where things get weighted down, and again, by bringing some levity to it, it really livened things up too. Dan, what was your toughest scene to write?
I've been thinking about it since you asked to the other guy.
See, I cheated. I gave you guys time. I let the actors take the first hit.
The hardest thing, well, Act 3, right? You know, that's the worst place in the world for any expository shit. No exposition in Act 3.
And there was very little exposition in the movie in general,
right?
Which also always works great in horror.
Thank you, Jeff.
That's always the worst thing in a movie. You get to the ending and you find out what the monster is, and then it cuts to the Air Force One, and then, you know, and it's like, you know, and it's like, you know, it was so much fun.
The cigar comes down. We got to get John McClane in there.
Except at the very end when they nuke it. Then that's great when they nuke the town, but, you know, we didn't have any. It was hard writing the ending. You want to do the big mob scene. You want to have a lot of spectacle. We didn't have any money, so how do you just keep it to the characters? And that actually was not hard to write, but the hardest thing to write is the car scene when they're driving and they're heading to Terminal 13, and Justin Wellborn and Scotty, you know, Ben and Clark are in the car, and he's putting on the tinfoil hat, and you know, and it's like, how do you? That started to really go into some political spaces about, you know, we're all signing up for this, and, you know, and then it cuts to the flashback where he was actually battling the signal, and it's like, it was replacing my thoughts, you know. And, you know, it was really hard. I wrote that monologue that Ben says, and the same one, and the one that Justin says about the ions popping out of your brain cells, and that was all rewritten about 25 times, because it just never felt right. It always felt awkward, and always felt wrong to have any introduction of, you know. Now they're talking about it's always, you know, Grindhouse. It's the thing where that's the scene that Rodriguez just cut out of the movie. You know, that was the reel that he just took out. You know?
Well, what was good was that rather than it being any sort of a sensible explanation, it was a guy that was affected by the signal, wearing aluminum foil on his head, trying as desperately hard as he could to scientifically understand it. Which, I mean, I wear aluminum foil sometimes.
You can't trust our movie, man.
Oh, you know what? It was about probably a year after we were done shooting. I went online and I was looking up like extremely low frequencies and like non-lethal new weaponry and stuff. And this guy had instructions on how to make a tinfoil hat to protect you from your computer. And he has a website, and you can go there, and it teaches you how to make the ideal tinfoil hat.
That's awesome.
And I was like, I got it.
I never have time to construct it. I just wrap it around my face and poke some eye holes. Let's open it up to the crowd for your questions. Question was in regards to what the budget was. If you guys were able to comment, I would add to it what was your shoot schedule, and explain Exquisite Corpse, because it's an old idea, but it definitely should be explained.
We're not at liberty to talk too much about the budget or the schedule. It was just a shoestring budget. I mean, it's lower than you can probably imagine. And well, thank you very much for that. That's very complimentary. Exquisite Corpse came out of a project that we are ongoing in Atlanta called the Dailies Project. It's through Push Push Theater, and which is under the umbrella of New Street Arts, and it's just a workshop theater. And every quarter or so, we put out challenges to the local filmmakers, kind of like the Five Obstructions or something like that, where you try to get them out of their comfort zone and put them into circumstances where they're having to be more creative to overcome obstacles as filmmakers. And one of those was, early on, a few years back, was the Exquisite Corpse. And it was an old surrealist idea of you start a piece and you pass it on to the next guy to keep it going. There's some ego loss in that process. I think we wanted to do it with a film. So that's
because it was usually done with painting.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was done with stories, like in short story format. It still is actually done on the internet a lot with short stories.
Is it?
Yeah, it was Mad Libs before there was Mad Libs, isn't it? Let's get another question from the crowd. Right there, you sir in the middle in the blue shirt. The question was in regards to good old Jim Parsons, who had that great piece of dialogue we discussed earlier. Was he affected by the signal, or was he just comedically, in an absurdist fashion, utterly confused and just going to the party to get laid and forgetting that there was blood on the floor and everything else?
Well, I mean, the signal exacerbates your fears and desires, or it's basically just the tipping point for things that are already inside of you. The signal is neither good nor evil. It just is evasive. So
he was definitely affected by the signal.
I mean, that's the question. That's the great question the movie asks, and that's kind of the fun game for the audience, is to go, who is affected by the signal? That's the puzzle. That's the mystery, and that's sort of the game that we play with the movie. I sort of look at it as, I don't really think of him as a sort of a sleaze. I sort of think of him as overcompensating for, some sort of sexual inadequacy. And we don't know what Jim Parsons was like before that. Perhaps he's a virgin. So
I will think of him that way forever. So you, ma'am, in the middle, then we'll get you in the back. Question was in regards to, was there any way that one of you killed somebody and somebody else did? I remember hearing something about when the Burning Man was in one of your films, the other two was like, wait a minute, I got to get something cool. I got a car wreck or something like that. So that was the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, will you ever work together again? Hopefully you won't, but I'm waiting to hear the answer.
Yeah, we had a really healthy competition on just on the horror elements of trying to figure out interesting kinds of murders that we could have and all kinds of fun spectacle that we could play with. And there was definitely a volley when we were writing it of, we're going, oh my God, pesticide tank. Okay. How about a mace built with knives? Okay, Burning Man. All right, yeah, we'll do car wreck, or we'll do something really simple. We're going to counteract that. You're getting so weird right now. You've got a balloon pump. I'm going to go back to baseball bat, and I'm just going to do it in a really sweet way, just to kind of top you. And there was definitely a very, very healthy competition. And to this day, I can't tell you which is my favorite. They all have such different tonal flurries to them.
I didn't feel like I could compete with the weaponry. So I just said, well, so what? They kill each other. What's more interesting is what you do with them after they're dead. So.
A lot of necrophiliacs would agree with you.
And of course, we'll go to you, ma'am, right in the middle. Great question, actually. Just portrait of indie filmmaking. I mean, I love this Atlanta collective that we got going on. All these different people. As indie filmmakers, obviously, you talked earlier about you using the camera while you were directing. What kind of roles did you guys also have to do in addition to writing, directing, and being each other's cameramen? Did you have your actors hauling lights? And, what could you just tell us about the process of actually getting an independent film made under duress circumstances?
Well, we definitely wore a bunch of hats, but I mean, it'd be insane for us not to give credit to all of the people that came out and worked for next to nothing and worked, 16, 20-hour days and just threw everything on the line, who had no aspirations at the time of this getting them another job necessarily, just going, God, we really want to see, a cool movie happen, so we'll throw that out to you. And then inside of that, we all wore many different hats, but so did a lot of different people. People were doing all kinds of different things on set. Between us, we tended to tag team direct a lot because we didn't have the liberty of shooting out all of somebody's section. We'd have to share locations and stuff, so we'd literally get a shot, and then we'd high five and switch and toss the camera over. And typically one guy'd be in another room prepping a set, or working with a production designer, or working with the actors, or something like that. So. You guys want to add to that?
We couldn't afford a DP, so we had to shoot it ourselves.
Yeah. Will you guys work together again? Or are you going to plan like another project? You'll either do it in segments like this or just more superfluous?
On one level, we will always. These guys are. I'm definitely coming to them with any scripts I have for coverage anytime I have one, because they're brilliant. But beyond that, I think that there's maybe some more transmissions.
Cool.
Who knows what format? Could be graphic novel. Who knows? But
graphic novel would be awesome. AJ Scott. A lot of the budget had to go obviously to Scott's Gulfstream, to AJ's huge trailer. Did you guys as actors find yourselves kind of doing crew positions, which does happen sometimes on indie films?
On this particular shoot, not necessarily so much, but before that. Honestly, when I am not in front of the camera, working with all these guys for years and years and years, I'll be holding the boom. I'll be working on locations. I'll be working on setting up the craft services table. That's just how we do. And
Scott's actually in the movie more than once. I just want to let that be known. And I would like to know if anybody noticed whether or not where he was in the movie.
2 different characters.
He plays 2 different characters in the movie The Signal. Does anybody know? No. Boom, Duckman.
Who was it? Wait.
In the exploitation film in the beginning, the exploitation prologue, that is actually Scott Poythress as Hap Hap Good.
Nice.
Hi. So sweet.
AJ, other positions or just thoughts on making an indie film as an actor?
It's funny because this is definitely the movie with the least amount of money into it that I've worked on. It was also the most enriching experience, and it was hands down the most professional that I've ever worked on, which goes to show, you don't need a studio. And I think that, there was very little that I had to worry about besides making sure I had plenty of Jameson, and the only thing that we didn't have was a stunt person. I didn't carry anything. They didn't trust me with it because we only had one of everything, and they didn't want me to break it. So no camera for me, no boom stuff. But I did get to hit people, and that was an awful lot of fun.
You reminded me of one thing. We got to throw some props out to a guy named Kid Richmond who lit himself on fire for nothing.
Yeah.
Our one stunt guy. Yeah.
And hopefully lived to tell about it.
Thanks, Alex.
Came down from Richmond, Virginia, lit himself on fire, and left.
Yeah, which we actually thought, Alex, the producer, kept talking. Every time we get into script discussions, he'd be like, oh, yeah, and the man on fire. And we thought he was kidding the entire time up until right before production. Yeah.
I was like, all right, I kind of want that to happen, but I know it probably won't happen because it's probably too expensive. And Alex was like, no, it's going to happen. We're going to get a man on fire. I'm like, whatever, Alex. Yeah, we're going to get a man on fire. And then we get all the way up to that scene. I was just going to have to come up with something else because it's really just one line. Guy runs by on fire. And it was just kind of like, haha, won't they think that's funny? It's like, no, dude, seriously, every day I'd come over. We're going to get the guy on fire. I'm like, who? Just trust me. We're going to get a guy on fire. I'm like, but that's like more expensive than anything in our movie. No, we'll get a guy on fire. And then, he rolls up, pours himself, and there was no one else. It was just him, and Alex had to be the one who put him out. Really? So, yeah.
God bless Craigslist.
He drove over from another state.
Yeah, he came from Virginia, and he
came a long way to set himself on fire.
Did you really find him on Craigslist?
No, Jason Tesoro is a friend of mine.
Oh, no?
No, Craigslist.
No, if you want Kid Richmond to light himself on fire, he also does other.
He does other stunts.
He'll fall on fire.
He's actually quite professional. But he came down and he was just like, he organized the crew and he was like, everybody stand around. I'm going to give you some safety lessons real quick. And then he's like, you're going to be doing this. You're going to be doing this. You're going to be doing that. And then we rolled.
What?
Yeah, AJ, when you type in "man on fire" on Craigslist, I don't think that's the result you get, buddy.
Well, you can find plenty in Casual Encounters.
All right, another question right here, you sir, second row. Good question. A staple of independent cinema is that, low locations, when people go outside, they're usually also like someone's backyard, the forest, something controllable. What about kind of when you're dealing with city streets and especially a train station?
Well, we worked really hard to not shoot this all in our friends' apartments. That's just too student. But there's.
But yeah, we did.
But we did though. No, we worked. We really wanted to. Lisa Yeiser's our art department person. She worked really hard to dress even the exteriors, and we did get a few permits. The thing about Atlanta is like they would come and put up like the sign saying "Do not park here on this day," and nobody cared. They parked there anyway. So there was cars constantly. There's continuity nightmares with that, but. We did some pirating. We went down into some of the subways when nobody was looking, and they don't like you to be shooting a horror movie in the subways. So.
We did one pickup. The thing that Rod sees off the top of the building was a pickup that we did after principal photography, and we basically threw a keg party at the theater that we all worked at, and just sent it out on the email and was like, free beer, be in a movie, and bring a weapon. And so everybody had to, look around their house and see what they could bring and come up with. And I mean, you only see it for a couple frames, because if you see it for any longer than that, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But if you do ever get that frame and pause it, I mean, there's mops. There's a girl walking through the middle of the frame with a tea kettle.
It's a bunch of good old boys with weapons. I like it.
Yeah,
and a keg. I mean, why not? That's terrifying. One or two last questions. Right there, you on the aisle. Question was in regards basically to getting funding. You talked earlier about somebody's inheritance funding a film. What were your challenges for getting funding?
Well, we had a private investor that we'd worked with, and my company, Pop Films, and Alex Motlog, my producing partner, and I basically just... It was somebody who's an angel, Hilton Garrett is his name, and he's an angel because he believed in us enough to sort of invest in this movie. And I think that ultimately it was one of those things where he had sort of worked with us on some other films and wanted to be a part of it. So I guess it was just that Atlanta feeling. You know what I mean? Nothing like that hometown Atlanta feeling. To get people in the mood to want to make movies, and it was a challenge. It was very difficult. It was very difficult to come up with that kind of thing and raise the money. But we had made another movie before that, so we showed that we could make another movie.
You guys have been very generous with your time. I can't wait to see what you do next. Give it up again for David Bruckner, Jacob Gentry, Dan Bush, AJ Bowen, and Scott Poythress.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks.
Right on.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to co-writer, co-directors Dan Bruckner, Jacob Gentry, and Dan Bush, podcast listeners just like you, except they actually got a film made. And of course, actors AJ Bowen and Scott Poythress, who were all here today to discuss their new film, The Signal. If you dug this episode of the podcast in general, consider tossing a virtual tip into our PayPal virtual tip jar by visiting www.creativescreenwritingmagazine.blogspot.com and look for the PayPal icon. Your tips are appreciated and definitely help out with equipment, hard drives, and all the other stuff we need to keep this podcast running. Of course, feel free to check out my blog, which I even managed to update on the rare occasion that I have time to do so by visiting www.jeffgoldsmith.blogspot.com. You can also always feel free to drop me a line by emailing me at yo.goldsmith@gmail.com, and I'll do my darndest to get back to you as soon as I can. Of course, don't forget to click that subscribe button in iTunes or your podcatching software, because that's how episodes are downloaded automatically every time you click refresh. And if you have a minute, feel free to leave us positive feedback in the iTunes Music Store or at podcastalley.com. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, Senior Editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, thanking you again for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.